morning, everybody. So I was just telling Yvonne in the background and Neola that I had a presentation to give today, but I just returned from Asia, and I ended up changing all my slides as of last night. And the reason is, you know, when you look at China or you look at what's happening in Asia, they are at least 10 years ahead of us. And they're not just talking about change management. They're not emerging economies. They are developed economies that are leaving us as the first world that a lot of us think that we're living in. So I thought I will change it up and talk a bit about future work and why culture and customer experience is key in this area. You know, myself, along with a lot of us at KPMG, we think about this a lot. And you know, I've come from the tech industry, worked at companies like Dell Technologies, Hewlett-Packard, Microsoft, HP, many others, and there's a need for us to evolve much faster when it comes to future work. KPMG, you may be thinking, what's KPMG doing on a change management stage and fourth industrial revolution? KPMG may be known as an accounting firm or tax providers or advisory providers, but KPMG itself, it's about 200,000 people around the world. We have in Canada about 6,500 people or so, very diverse, almost 40% diverse females, you know, within our organization. It's actually 46%, so we're really proud of that. But we're also going through our internal digital transformation, but we're also helping a lot of our clients digitally transform. So when you look at our services around digital transformation services, culture, change management, people and change, along with our cybersecurity, privacy, and more importantly, we're advising almost 80+% of the world's Fortune 500 companies. But what we're most proud about is our difference that we make in the world. And you know, all of 200,000 of us combined, we end up spending almost 500,000. Is that me? No? No, it's not. I was hearing some footsteps in the background. It wasn't just me, right? You guys were hearing it? Hey, Chanzev. I'm like, is it the lonely guy up on stage who's hearing some, you know, stampede coming behind me? So we're super proud of the 500,000. See, I'm still hearing that stampede. Super proud of the 500,000 hours that we all put in every year, but more importantly, the awards that we all win. So usually I present data slides. I decided not to present data slides today other than these two and maybe two more. The rest of the slides you'll see are what I learned in traveling around the world over the last 25 years. And what I find is that we all talk about that 40% of the jobs won't exist, or we talk about how automation is going to take so many of the current jobs that we're working on away from us. But if you look at the optimistic glass half full side of the picture, almost 65% of the CEOs and the leaders surveyed are saying they feel optimistic about the fourth industrial revolution. And they think that it's really going to change the way they're going to drive their own industries forward. But then there are some other changes that are taking place. The first big change is the lifespan of 100+ years. So millennials and the Gen Zs and others, they're going to live to 100+ years. And when you take a look at some of the demographic of 50% of the children growing up in today will live to over 100. But not just that, we have lots of people who are now projecting that the life cycle and the lifespan of these human beings and the experiences that they have is going to be dramatically different. We know that we're going to be living in the world of a gig worker economy, right? What does that mean? It's your you know, temporary workers, leisure workers, Uber drivers, and there is going to be more and more of that industry. And projections basically show that by 2028, 50% of all workers are going to be in a gig economy type of leisure working environment. So forget work from home concepts that we all grew up with. This is going to be a totally different way of how people work and they participate, and how companies should adopt to that. Also, an important factor, remember, is that jobs as a function didn't really exist 125 years ago. If I showed you a chart which I was thinking driving in this morning that I should have added that chart in. If you look at 125 years ago, majority of the world population worked in agriculture type environments, right? And that wasn't work. It was essentially entrepreneurs who were in some sort of a trade that they were not working in, but they were in some sort of an entrepreneurial environment. If you remember, the last names were blacksmith, or if you were in India or if you were in China, the last names were off something. So if you were a shoemaker's child, your response or your last name would end with that. Now you just have Smith. It doesn't have blacksmith, right? I see a bunch of people who are from the Indian descent. So if you look at Jutiwala, for example, a lot of you will say, oh yeah, we remember that. 1.6 billion people in India still have that last name. And the reason was that there was a shoemaker's children, and that's what you would say that they were. But you won't say that I'm an engineer, doctor, or others 125 years ago. So that's changed. Projections are over the next 20 years, not 125 years, the next 20 years, we're actually going to go back to something that's going to look very, very different than us working at a bank or at a retailer or as an engineer or as a lawyer. So experiences define us going forward. Right? So if we talk about future of work, it's what people are looking for from us is experiences. So if you look at what you are looking at in terms of your Uber or your Airbnb experience or your Netflix experience or your retail experience, you know that your times are changing, and you know that the times we're all living in are changing dramatically, from how we consume retail products to how we consume insurance products to how we consume public sector digital products. There are countries like Brazil and India and others where you don't even have to file taxes, where they will grab the tax from you right up front. So why do you even need a tax accountant afterwards, for that matter, right? So things are changing dramatically in terms of how the times are changing, from what we saw from the silent generation to the baby boomer generation to millennials to I totally skipped my generation because I don't think it even exists. It's a sandwich between baby boomers and millennials, right? If you're in 40-something, I've been hard-pressed to find anything on Google of what that generation is. But it really goes from silent generation, baby boomers, to millennials, and then you go to Gen Zs. So I don't know how many of you relate to this, but risk is changing. For sure. We have presidents of great countries sitting on golden toilets tweeting early in the morning. And that changes the game for 400 million people who live in the United States, like this, by a tweet. And it's very different than how people used to think how risk should be. Should I think 5 times before? Should I call my risk person? Not really. You're able to tweet something and change a policy and change, go to war, change diplomatic policies, go see, democratic or non-democratic people of North Korea by a tweet, and that changes dramatically. If you look at areas of or age of personalization, the next generation, my kids included, I'm blessed to have kids who, where I have an 18-year-old who's a millennial, and then I have a 13-year-old. I think she's a Gen Z. And then I have a 8-year-old who's not yet to be defined what that would be. But if I look at all 3 of those generations in my own household, that's how fast it's changing. If I thought about when I was growing up, we had 4 siblings. That was not the case. It was all the same generation. In my household, because my children are 5 years apart each, you can see a huge difference between them. Right? My youngest doesn't even watch TV. He just watches YouTube of people unpacking gifts, for example. Right? I'm like, how does that work? Of you watching, why are you intrigued by that? But clearly, areas of personalization. So I don't judge anymore of how personalization is really for each individual. And if you look at the demographic that we're all serving, and when we said 50% of our workforce is going to be those millennials, that's going to change dramatically. And you think that's going to change, then Gen Zs are going to come in, and that's going to require a totally different environment that they're going to walk in. And you can't get them to conform to a large bank or to a large public sector institution or an insurance or energy company or retail or whatever you may be. You have to really adopt, and you have to change your culture for that reason. I don't know how many of you resonate with this. Relationships are changing. Relationships are changing on how we interact with each other. There was a time when, I would ask somebody to go out to coffee with me. And this is way before arranged marriages, by the way. So arranged marriages wasn't cool. Oh, yeah, I'm going to go date somebody and ask them to have coffee with me. And now I swipe left or right. Right? I don't, but others do. But nothing wrong with that, again, right? That there are ways that the world is changing and how you are able to customize your romance or you're able to customize your relationships that you have with others, that's changing dramatically. In China, for example, where I just came from, out of the 1.6 billion, 1.7 billion people, almost 1 billion people have smartphones. What really shocked me was you're able to take your phone out, and if there's an unfortunate person at the side of the street begging, they're wearing a QR code. And you take your phone with the WeChat app, right? You've seen this, and you scan their QR code, and you're able to pay them, right? So if you're talking about experiences down to a beggar, and by the way, true story, right? This is not like a bunch of people from China who are nodding their head if you've been there. That's nothing compared to how you're able to get deliveries of food service and you're able to get deliveries of anything you want for almost 75 cents. So it's not that you're paying a different type of a cost basis for that. Experiences are changing. I don't know how many of you know this, but Google now has come up with a stat where all Google searches, almost 40% of Google searches are voice now. They're not, how we type on Google, where is change leadership happening this morning? Is it on Mars? You talk to it, right? That's where the world is. We have to think about the experiences that we're having in our household with Alexa, Google Home. There's work that my team in artificial intelligence and others, but many of the retailers at Loblaws and Sobeys and others who are working on where if you're driving home from work, you're able to talk to the app and you're able to get your food ready and you're actually talking to a chatbot or you're talking to an AI by getting your food ready. It's coming. It's going to be out literally in 6 months. So those are things that we think, oh, it's fiction. China already has that for the last 5 years. Right? We don't have that. People who come to this country, by the way, from India and China, think that they're banking. I know you're laughing because you're probably in Mumbai or somewhere recently. You're able to have banking that is at least 10 years ahead, payment services that are 10 years ahead. Right? We live in a cocoon that we think is a first world country. It's not, especially in this area, because we're stuck to our conservative ways of thinking as Canadians. We have to change that. And I think that future work only changes if we get our risk appetite and our conservative methodologies. Now, at the same time, we're in this new age. And this new age requires us to change not only from our conservative methodologies, so park conservatism, park regulation, park oligopoly, park all of this on one side. You can't change that anymore. What you can change is that I was sitting next to a plane. I'm not going to mention who because you guys will figure it out in 2 seconds. But one of the very large retailers of Canada and their CEO and their board basically has now figured out that Amazon Prime, how many of you use Amazon Prime for delivery? Right? So just look around, by the way, that's like 80% of the room. Would you be shocked if I told you that you are all and we are all in an echo chamber right now? Where in Canada, Amazon Prime's penetration rate is only 15%. In the US, it's at 75%. But this room is almost at 80% already. But the rest of Canada is not. So imagine when that happens, when 15% gets to 50% or gets to 75%. That's what I'm talking about here, which is our new age that we have to adopt to, meaning that you have new industries coming in underneath the regulations that we have set for finance or for retail and for others. Did you know that Netflix, when they first came to Canada, the Canadian government didn't charge Netflix taxes for the longest time? until our Chorus Entertainment and all the other media folks basically said, what are you doing? You are totally, losing out on such huge, tax reforms and tax regulations that you should be thinking about. But government and regulation can't keep up with this. So you have to think about how you are thinking about this new digital economy and as a service, personalized economy, and how that's going to change. So personalized service is key. Personalized service for everything you do, from ordering your car to not even having a car, to then ordering food service, to having food service as a service, meaning that they will just, this happens in China and India, by the way, where if you allow the AI to know your habits, and if you've ordered a bunch of times from this restaurant, a Thai restaurant, an Indian restaurant, or a Vietnamese restaurant, and others, it knows your patterns, like Nest, and Nest knows when to turn your temperature up or down. It has that same pattern, so it will actually send you, I think you're in the mood for this today, and all you have to do is say yes, right? So that's what's called personalization. Personalization of medicine. That's changing. If you go to Finland or Sweden and others, you're able to walk into a GP's office. Here, we're actually having a challenge to find GPs. They're actually thinking about how to not even look at the medical school to be 12 to 15 years anymore. Medical school should not be 12 to 15 years, because when you're wearing an Oura ring, or you've got RFID sensors in your shoes or your clothing. I just met somebody from Lululemon who were saying that they're actually coming up with Aquaman-like clothing, which will essentially be breathable clothing that will have sensors built in. So when we say Aquaman and we say, oh, that's not the future, clothing is going to look very different going forward. And by the way, it's being tested in many different countries already. So age of medicine, meaning that when you walk into a GP's office, your sensors have already provided so much data that your GP needs to spend more time socially interactive with you versus looking at all your charts and computing a lot of that information. So that's changing dramatically. Personalization of education. I don't know about you, but second or third industrial revolution way of education is not going to work going forward. So if you look at the second or third industrial revolution, you come out, you go to kindergarten, you go to middle school, you go to high school, you go to college or university, you get your internship. That model doesn't work. I'll give you an example. How many of you know what the Knowledge Society is? Raise your hand if you know what that is. TKS. So you should all know what that is. Two really cool guys came up with this concept in Calgary, and now they're in Toronto. And it's basically educating kids at the age of 13 to 17. And by the way, if you met any of those girls, like Raya or Ananya and some of them, they are phenomenal. 15-year-old girls who have already figured out quantum computing solutions or brainwave technologies where you're able to move cars, small cars, by thinking, and they're moving. And this is not happening in China. This is happening 2 blocks away from here, right? They have a 170 people cohort, and these people are not, by the way, my daughter just applied for this as well and just got in, so I'm telling you my daughter's not a genius. What they're looking for is people who are creative, people who have very high EQs, not people who have very high IQs. Because IQs, what I'll show you later, it will shock you on how that's going to change. You really need to think about how to use exponential technologies for your own benefit. So education needs to change. So Dr. Lashmi over at Ryerson and what they're doing at DMZ, or what the work that's happening at U of T, we all collectively need to think about, do we even need to hire people with 4-year degrees? KPMG in UK has removed the requirement for 4-year degrees. Google's removed it. Apple's removed it. IBM has removed it. Why? Because if you have a Python developer, or if you have somebody who's a very creative person right at the cusp of 17 years old, or 15 years old, or 16 years old, or even 21, 25, 35, if they have a skill set, then hire that skill set now. Not that you are conforming to the second, third industrial revolution way of education. So that's changing, and you'll see more and more of the banks and retailers and others, because there'll be a huge talent shortage, because the way education is still churning out talent, and what you need to actually get your work done is 2 different things. And that's changing. We saw that in community colleges a bit, and then now you're going to see this as self-learning personalization of education. So personalization of everything. Let me turn on the subject more towards industry. So if you think that it's only happening in personal lives, it's also happening in the industries as well. So if you look at industries, everything is upside down now. So if you are a retailer and you are so worried about providing new customer experiences and no longer worried about, oh, people are just going to walk into my Loblaws or Sobeys or whatever grocery store that you provide. They're really thinking about the new models of customer experiences that you need to provide to keep up with the Amazon Primes of the world, right? I just met the Loblaws digital guy, really, really cool young individual, happened to meet him in Edmonton, and he was telling me about there's a new, I can't remember the name of it, it's called PC Optimum, but there's a, if you pay $100, what do you call that? None of you are on this? PC Insider, there you go. How many of you know what PC Insider is? Okay, see? So I just did the survey. How many of you use Amazon Prime? Like 80%. PC Insider is Amazon's Prime killer in Canada. Now, don't you think we should be using PC Insider more than Amazon Prime? Because Amazon Prime essentially uses our economy as a service economy, uses all of our dollars that we utilizes with them, and then they take all their IP and they move it down to the US, and they take all their investments and others. They use Canada as a talent pool, by the way. Another fact, this is a tangent that I promised myself I won't go on to, but I'll go on to. So you know, by the way, that Canada's GDP, 0.9% of our GDP is research and development now. The next 20 countries, on average, are at 1.7%. Let me repeat, 0.9%, 1.7%. Why? Because the example I just gave, right? PC Insiders, $100, you pay that, you can get unlimited deliveries from everything to do with Loblaws or Shoppers Drug Mart or others. We don't even know about them, right? Skip the Dishes was founded in Winnipeg. We use Uber Eats all the time, right? So, no, true story, by the way. And I know Jazeb is here, and a lot of people, him and I have talked about this. He came up with this amazing new tech called Knockery. Are you presenting, or is someone else presenting from your team? So can I do the pitch or no? No, okay, maybe I won't do the pitch then, because I don't want to take the thunder away. But really cool HR, AI technologies where you can essentially interview by sitting in front of a PC. In front of a PC. IBM signed them up with 300,000 employees. They went and knocked on so many doors in Canada. No, thank you. Right? Go to the US like this, done. So how do we get our 0.9% higher to not just 1.7%, but higher than that is super important. Our patent filing in Canada has dropped to 45-year lows, by the way, right? Because when we see the Amazons or we see the Facebooks, and by the way, nothing wrong with any of those, we have to complement them with using our startup technologies to help drive it. Okay, I'll get off the tangent. So, so end of verticals. End of verticals meaning that industry verticals. What do I mean by that? So think about if you are if you are using Amazon today, and you would say, well, I'm using Amazon because I'm getting a new retail kind of an environment, right, or experience. But at the same time, when they're also giving you insurance at the same time, and they're also giving you, other types of services that come from, let's say, pharmaceutical, or they come from, other adjacent areas, the end of verticals happen, meaning that you're no longer thinking, oh, I'm working in a retail industry, or I work in a banking industry, or I work in the medical industry anymore, because all of those lines are going to blur dramatically. I'll give you an example. 60 years ago, if you looked at the S&P 500, 60 years ago, an average S&P 500 company lasted on the S&P 500 for 60 years. Now, an S&P 500 company averages 11 years. Why? Because they don't transform fast enough to keep up with this pace of change. Bless you. And then you look at, bless you. Then you look at Amazon, and you look at Google, and you look at Facebook, and you look at Apple. All of these companies combined have a $4.2 trillion market cap. But a lot of these companies, if you notice what Apple has recently done, Apple is no longer just in the device-making business. They're in the subscription business, right? So they're no longer just stopping at what they did with devices, because they know they have hit the saturation rate of Apple iPhones. So where are they moving to? Apple credit card. Apple Music Service, which we already knew. But now Apple Music Service has turned into Apple News Service. Why get a Global Mail app for $9 a month, or Wall Street Journal and Times, New York Times and others? If you pay Apple $9.99, you're able to get all of this through Apple. So what happens to all of that media publications? They don't stop there. Then they're going after Amazon Prime Video Service or Netflix by coming up with their own curated show with Oprah Winfrey and many others like that, right? So why is all that happening? Because Apple's already figured out that their device-making game is done. They have to now evolve. So if you think of Apple's already now figuring out their third life, Microsoft has just figured out their second life, which is from Windows to now Azure Cloud. Right? Google is trying to find their second life away from just advertisements to somewhere else. Think about all the organizations we all work in. What's our second life? Are we even thinking about that today? Right? So that's future work for us. So okay, data is great. Data is going to create a lot of havoc, but then data is also good and bad. Right? So think about this for a second. So data. Not going to name names of who's in trouble with the privacy regulators right now or others, but let's just say, there was a study recently done by the way, Canadian Census and others. They said that Canadian citizens trust the private sector more with their data than the government. Think about this for a second. Government has all my information, everything. They have from taxes to my medical records to my children's medical records to everything I've ever done, right? But we trust the private sector more. Oh, we'll give our data to Facebook or Google more. Yeah, they'll protect it. And now you're seeing what's happening. So the world is moving more towards China, by the way, has created the new credit scoring system. Have you guys figured this out yet? Have you heard about this? This boggled my mind totally. So now, what's your credit score in Canada? Oh, your finances, how you pay off your credit cards and things like that. They have added, have you received traffic tickets? They have added your social behavior, how many times you have tweeted about that, the Chinese government, or if you have attended a rally and you have checked in there. Or you travel to certain countries that China doesn't approve of, right? Your credit score is now based on that. It's public knowledge, by the way. You can Google it. It's public knowledge. It's available. Now, that's not to say China is only doing this. Many other countries may go in that direction. You have to think about what's good, what's bad. Some of the things that the Canadian government's working on, and a bunch of us advise the Canadian government and the Ministry of Innovation and Data and Privacy. They're thinking really long and hard about this. Anne Kevorkian, I believe, is going to be speaking. She's amazing at this subject, so you should ask her lots of questions on this because she really believes in forward thinking of privacy and privacy by design, but more importantly, privacy portability or data portability. So for example, think about this for a second. Wouldn't it be nice where Canada can be the data for good place? Bring your data to Canada. We can be the Switzerland of data. Leverage our multicultural assets. Look at this room, right? Super multicultural. You go to China, you go to India and other places, it's one demographic, unfortunately, right? So you're able to use that multicultural aspect of what you train the AI, the old adage of garbage in, garbage out. So AI is just like that. So what you put into the AI is what you get out. So can Canada be the platform where you can have anonymized data, where you can leverage the anonymized data to then have data portability, meaning that if you are banking at RBC and you decide to go from RBC to CIBC, you should be able to say, I am switching. Me, Armughan, I'm switching, and then all my data disappears with RBC, goes to CIBC, right? That doesn't happen today. If I go from RBC to CIBC, not only do they keep it, a lot of that data is then shared between them and other things like that. So that world, we have to think about good versus evil of data. They say that, oh, we're protecting your data, but let's just say, we need to have the right type of, not just regulation and how we think about this going forward. So the promise is that data is protected, but the reality is that data still needs to be put in our hands and how we control our data. There is incredible work to be done. If I rated ourselves from 1 to 10 where we are, we're probably at a 1. Right? Some countries are at a 5 or a 6. We really need to be moving a lot faster on data portability. So data we know is fueling everything. Would this shock you if I said that IQ in 30 years will surpass 10,000? How many people are surprised? Raise your hand if you're surprised. You know what the average IQ is in the world right now? Take a guess. 150, right? 100, 80, 90? Look at that number, 10,000. So how do you work in an environment, and that's not to scare you. This is real. It's happening. So the next part of my presentation, which I'm going to run a bit over, I hope it's OK. No? So changing the landscape in hyperscale. So let me talk about this for a second. Oh, can you go back one slide, please? OK, let's see if this slide works. The slide doesn't work. OK, let me go back. So forget the hyperscale. Look behind the hyperscale. So what this is showing you is cameras when they were analog for so many years. And this curve that you see is called the exponential curve. If there's one thing that I want you to remember out of this presentation is exponential thinking. And exponential thinking is this curve. This means that you continue to invest, but then it takes off. And that's the time where do you think, oh, no, I'm not going to invest in myself as a human being or in my technologies and others. We're in hyperscale mode. So when you looked at analog cameras to compact digital cameras to then, so compact digital is blue, by the way. DSLR, if you remember that time, that's green. And then mirrorless, which is DSLR without the mirrors so that they can compact them, are the red ones. And then you see the yellow. And then what you don't see is the 150x towards your way right is the cameras that are in your phone, right? So that's grown. Now think about every industry this way. Trust me on this. Every industry is growing at least 150x or beyond. This is no longer human beings. We tend to look at the past and then we learn from it. What we need to do is we need to live in the present and more focus on what the future is and not worry about the past as much, because the decisions that we will need to take is our frame of reference needs to be now. So it's not about, I'm picturing a robot, the robot would look like this. I wanted to use a video that I was not allowed to use. Search Boston Dynamics. And Boston Dynamics has this robot where you're able to not only have these robots jumping up and down, they are doing packing services, they're doing delivery services, many things like that. It's really cool that you see that and you say, oh, that's a prototype. It's actually not a prototype. A lot of these Chinese factories, one of the Chinese factories, and many of them that are now deploying this in their manufacturing world, almost 90% of the human workers are replaced with robots. Production has risen by 250%, and defects have dropped by 80%. If you think that, no, we're going to bring coal back and manufacturing jobs back in the US, let's just say that's not happening. Back in 2017, May 1st, a automated robotic brain surgery took place within 2.5 minutes that used to last for 2 hours, right? This is not like it's going to happen, trust me, this is coming, this is happening. It's just about regulations or production, and there may be a country who will just say, we don't need regulations, we're just going to start deploying that. That's going to change dramatically. There's loads of information on early detection of diabetes, to Alzheimer's, to breast cancers, to others, where people are really afraid, where you actually even use 23andMe. How many of you have used the 23andMe? Okay. I'm glad you haven't used it, because once you use 23andMe and they have all your DNA information, it's public information, or it's their information, it's private information. And imagine if they have your DNA information, what they will be able to do with a lot of that information. So you have to think about that, what's coming ahead. So let me give you an example of a real life what's going to happen over the next few years, where if you look at Google plus Uber, between search, self-driving cars, and predictive analytics, if you look at Uber deliveries, Uber plus driverless, we knew that accidents are about 1 in 1,000. So that's what that picture looks like. When you go to driverless autonomous vehicles, what happens to the car industry? Not only what happens to the car industry, look at the utilization rate. Today, our cars are parked while I'm here in the basement, and then I'm going to be at the office. It'll be parked underground there, and then I'll be at the house. It'll be parked. It's 3% utilization for my vehicle. When you go to driverless, 80% utilization. So think about that for all industries. But just don't stop on driverless. Think about what that's going to do to the insurance industry. If it's 1 in 1,000 was the car accidents, now you have 1 in 4 million. Do you need to buy insurance? Right? So that's going to change how people work in an insurance industry. So talk about future of work. Right? Talk about the culture. You can change whatever culture you want. So a lot of insurance companies are changing the ways that they are going to provide insurance going forward. So I was talking to Yvonne in the back. I recently read this book by Kai-Fu Lee. It's called AI Superpowers of the Divide Between China and Silicon Valley. And this actually shows you all of the job functions that exist today. And it's on an axis that you can see on the top is compassion needed, right, in those jobs. So you can see a teacher, you need a high compassion. You can see optimization on the left. You can see creativity and strategy on the right. And then at the bottom, you say compassion that's not needed. So let's see how many of you think that the bottom left quadrant will be totally taken over by AI. How many of you think that that would be the case? Raise your hand. OK, it's only 25% of you. That's all AI, by the way. So if you look at a radiologist job and others, my son recently got into a car accident, so we had to take him to Emerge, waited 6 hours. The Emerge doc looked at him and his friend Tristan and looked at both of them and said, no, you guys are good. You just have blue thumbs. You're good. Go home. Next morning, they ran it through the AI machine. Both of them were called back with 2 hairline fractures each. Right? So think about when you are looking at millions of X-rays, versus a human being who's looking at it while he or she, as an Emerge doctor, is being pinged in so many different directions as your sensorials are all over the place. How do you leverage that? Number 2, if you look at the economists, columnists, scientists, artists, research analysts, and others, that is where you use AI in certain areas, but then you use human and AI. There's a really cool company, a startup, that basically has now come up with a phone app where you're able to go to the ROM and look at the artists and then make each one of those pictures come alive so that it actually tells you a better story that way. That's a good example of AI and humans working together. Wedding planners and companions and others, I think everything with liberal arts needs to become cool again. Gone are the days that we used to say that it's, go become a doctor, an engineer, or an accountant. It was a lot more in my household. I think in the Chinese or the Indian household, you have not made it unless you become one of those. I know what I'm talking about here. So AI in the middle, but humans controlling that. And then finally, you look at humans and AI. So the point is, liberal arts gives you a lot of EQ, which is your emotional quotient. And what you have to think about is how you leverage the EQ to complement the 10,000 IQ-based AI that you're going to be working with. It's going to happen. You have a small robot running around outside that I noticed. That robot is going to, get to a 10,000 IQ. You may think in your current thinking that it will be dangerous, but I would say what I've noticed around the world where they're much more advanced than us in Canada, they're really changing the way they are collaborating with artificial intelligence. It's not, we shouldn't adopt it. It's more about how do we embrace it. So at KPMG, we think a lot about this. So we know that the trend on this slide is from left to right. You're thinking along those lines around intelligent automation. But then you look at what can be done. So on the right-hand side of the slide, it gives you those blocks. Number 1, so we know that in the bottom, physician, nurse, wealth advisor, insurance advisor, academic advisor, a sales advisor, a legal advisor, a tax advisor, all of those functions will get automated. But on the right, if you think about future work, it's 4 ways jobs will likely be transformed. First one is leveraged professional. Think about, does a paralegal using AI can do a job as good as somebody who went to law school? Of course, right? You don't necessarily need to go to law school as long as you have an AI with 10,000 IQ and you have a paralegal who understands a lot of that liberal arts, EQ-based thinking. They can do that. That's just an example. A connected worker, a surgeon who's performing surgery, can they leverage that AI or work with different robots and instruments to do their work? It's not about them doing it with their hands. They are able to collaborate with the AI better. So that means, and by the way, in our medical schools in Canada, we don't really teach that today. So people who are coming out of medical schools are not proficient at that. They will have to reskill themselves as they come out. Working at the speed of thought. This, to me, is the most important attribute that all of us need to develop. I think as Canadians, not just this room, we need to develop, which is we need to develop working at the speed of thought, meaning that we thought about it, we need to go do it, and it's okay to fail, but fail fast and move on. It's not the culture of, well, has this been proven? I'm going to see if she's done it yet, or if he's done it yet. Oh yeah, let have Janzeb fail first, and then maybe she will fail second, and then I will go try it, right? That's not going to work going forward. It's not going to work, I know, from a selfish standpoint, but it's not going to work from a country standpoint, because we're going to see job losses that are going to be in General Motors is going to, in Oshawa, it's going to look like a walk in the park. And it's not to say, not to scare you, what I'm saying is that if we shift our behavior and how we think our future work's going to be, it's really going to help us. KPMG, Deanna, are you here? I think she was. And what we're doing is we're doing a lot of that work in this area to ensure that we're advising a lot of our clients to think that way. And then finally, digital worker, meaning that we have to embrace digital workers, and digital workers need to work together with us instead of working against us. Digital workers are the robots, are the automation. Your store greeter at Walmart will get replaced. Don't get freaked out by that, right? It's okay. You can still pet that thing. Yeah, no. Okay, so we know that barriers to transformation exist. When you surveyed a lot of the HR human resource folks, how many human resource folks in the room? Raise your hand if there is any HR folks. Okay. So when you look at HR, you're thinking about 81% of the Canadian HR professionals believe that their role in HR is going to become much more strategic. It's no longer just providing people benefits or telling them how do they leverage their benefits or end of the year programs. It's very different. 61% are undergoing or heavily undergone digital transformation. But their top barriers that they highlight is, number one, capability. They don't think they have the capabilities. 55% of them think that. 38% think they don't have enough capacity, which is the answer everybody usually asks for. Capacity, I don't have enough people. And then finally, I don't have the culture to transform in my organization, right? And so you see this that's happening. So we know that our future is digital. We know that we don't have to embed chips, or we may have to embed chips for phone calls or something like that going forward. By the way, there's a really cool startup in, you remember Google Glass? Google got really famous by coming up with Google Glass. It was a colossal failure. And there's a company called North in Waterloo who have come up with glasses like mine and with a chip that's built into it where you won't even know that you're actually wearing my glasses or that guy's glasses. And they've already raised $120 million, by the way. It's not a small-time shop. And they've come up with some amazing technologies like that where I'm able to look at you and it would search your profile and it would show me your LinkedIn profile while I'm looking at you, right? So that digital, when I say it's a digital twin, you can have that digital twin today. So that change of culture is super important. So finally, this transformation's hard. Transformation's not easy. You have to think about how do you get this boulder up the hill by yourself? How do you get others to believe in this vision? Because you came in and listened to this keynote and many other fantastic keynotes that you're going to listen to. That's going to change. But we know transformation challenges happen when you're going from A to B. And it's not easy. You have this AI right next to you that you can leverage the data set, but that's not available. You know this adage, right? Where, no, I got this. It's good. I'm going to continue to doing it this way. I'm 5 years to retirement. I got it, right? people say that they're too busy. I don't think I'm going to leave here and really transform myself, right? If you don't transform yourself, someone else will come in and take your job, or your job won't even exist. The job will change dramatically. We know the barrier number 2 is around data. That data is in its silos. You can't even leverage all this data. So everything I'm talking about is really nice slides, but you may be thinking, it's so hard to transform. That's why I made the end of the presentation saying, this is super hard. It's not easy. You know, if it was easy, we would be ahead of China. We're not, right? Sometimes it's actually good where China, people were in bicycles 40 years ago, where we were, all on cars. But sometimes it's easy for them to, transform faster. We can also transform by learning from what China has done, or many of the other advanced countries who are leveraging AI and data. We gave birth to AI. Everybody talks about it in Canada, right? Jeffrey Hinton and Joshua Banja and others who just received Nobel Prize equivalents in Canada. But how do we commercialize it is super important. We have human limitations. So we know that our, humans always are this way. No, it's that person's job. No, Stephanie's going to do this. Or, oh, no, Michael's going to do this, right? So you have to somehow figure out how you own it and digitally transform at a pace of thought. Stop questioning the human impact. The human impact will continue to, create challenges, but I think we have to get people to keep thinking about, that this change is here. We have to differentiate ourselves. I think the other piece with this growth mindset is it's not just about 13-week quarters, because we're working for public companies and we have to deliver results. Because people say run the business and change the business, right? You still have to deliver results for your CEO, because they have to go to the shareholders and they'll get fired if they don't deliver their 13-week. Transformation doesn't take 13 weeks, which is, by the way, 1 quarter, right? Transformation takes a bit longer. There was a time where we would not have our earnings release every 13 weeks. Earnings release will come out 6 months, 12 months, right? Now it's instant gratification that public companies need. So at KPMG, we believe that there's 5 archetypes: a futurist, a shifter, a modeler, a transformer, and a shaper, right? So you have all of these various roles. You can adapt to those roles yourself. You can be the futurist, and you're thinking about future and reverse engineering to the present. You know what the shaper is, and others. You have to think about what that is. So I'm giving you some solutions here on you can pick one of these and think about who you are, right? And how you leverage yourself. Create a roadmap for yourself and for your organization. And that's something that KPMG provides to our clients. And that's something that we're very, very proud of, because we think that change is not easy, and people in change is the hardest thing to have. So with all that said, creation is easy, meaning this presentation is the easy part. You listening to it is the easy part. Prediction is hard, meaning that you have to think about data, how you leverage this data, how you drive insights out of that data to make some decisions. But execution is everything, right? What Thomas Edison was able to do with the light bulb, at that time, I'm sure there was a lot of people who were doing this, and there was huge boulders that were going up. That's our moment that we should be able to capture and not only stop here, but continue to evolve further. So thank you for your time this morning.
We have a few questions, if that's fine.
Sure, yeah.
Please.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
One more time for Armughan Ahmad. Thanks. We will open it up if there's any questions from the audience here.
Sure, go ahead.
Seems to me that the safest job, according to this presentation, is plumber.
His question was, the safest job, according to the presentation, is a plumber. It could be. It could be the creative part, right? Unless somebody comes up with new plumbing that never breaks again, that would be different. But I think in all seriousness, we have to think about, trades in Canada. The stats that I recently saw was almost 75% of tradespeople are first-generation immigrants. And that is growing faster and faster and faster. A lot of Canadians, or even I'm a first-generation Canadian. God blessed to come to this country, and I am who I am because of this amazing country and the people of this country. It is about finding the right people around you, the sponsorships that you get, and the mentorships that you receive. But it is that plumber who can invent the next generation plumbing, which people haven't figured out what the Uberized plumbing needs to look like, right? So in all seriousness, I think we have to think like that. Any other questions? Yes, in the back there. Yeah.
So we talked about the PC Insider and the Amazon.
Yes.
Isn't it because of bad marketing and also the heavy regulations in Canada? And if we let go of those regulations, how does that change the system?
Yeah, great question, right? Yeah, no, it's a good question. So for the longest time, we always said, regulation will protect us, and our airline industry, right? We won't let U.S. airlines come in because they'll take Air Canada and WestJet out like this, or we won't let telecom come in from the U.S. or the retailers come in from the U.S. I think it's not a protectionist society anymore. I think we have to evolve much faster. She asked a question about we talked about PC. What was it? I have a mental block. What's it called? Insider. Shame on me that I don't remember this. So PC Insider. I know PC Optimum because I have that on. PC Insider versus Amazon Prime. She said, is it bad marketing? That's why we don't know about that? Well, the reality is Amazon is what? It's worth about $1 trillion now. I don't know what Loblaws is worth. And you look at where they're marketing, and they almost have free marketing by individuals. I joke a lot about Trump and golden toilets and others, but quite honestly, I think it's not about make America great again. It's to focus on Canadian nationalism on our products, right? And figuring out what our products are, and our products should be first. Not about our people. People directly go to immigration right away, right? It's not immigration. It's actually our products, because most of the products in the U.S. That make up the Fortune 500 were first or second generation immigrants. Almost 55% of all of those companies that you see, including, by the way, Steve Jobs, who was son of a Syrian immigrant family, refugee family, right? You see many people who have come here. TD Bank, by the way, the top 2 executives at TD Bank, Bharat and their CFO, Riaz Ahmed, are both refugees, right? Who came in here, and now the CEOs and the CFOs of the biggest banks in Canada. The point is not immigration, point is nationalism for our products, right? And imagine if you asked me that question, and if all of us believed that before I walked in, we would be deleting Amazon Prime, and we should be going to this. And I'm not advocating for this, by the way. I'm just saying that's the nationalism we need. It doesn't exist. And that's why that marketing doesn't exist. Because in the US, they have figured it out. They don't call it nationalism. They just seem to be very strong at it, right? Sure. Yep, go ahead.
Hi.
Hi.
Thank you for, your talk. It was so good.
Thank you.
As a person who is working on an artificial intelligence project that we are working on, that whether a robot can design something, like a fashion design or something, I have a philosophical question for you. So in terms of creativity, we have 2 parts. We have inspiration and we have perception. So AI can imitate or learn perception from others. How do you think about inspiration? Because you were talking about right side corner. So yeah, I really want to know that. How do you think about this part? Thank you.
Wow. How long do we have? That's a really deep question. I'll give you a simple answer. I think when I talked about liberal arts, that's what I was referring to, right? Because liberal arts gives us more inspiration, gives us more aspiration, and takes us out of our traditional ways of thinking, right? Because I think sciences really does bucketize us, and it defines us that way. I think learning with liberal arts gives you that passion. It gives you that creativity. I think human beings have that creativity that we, unfortunately, in our 3rd industrial revolution, we squished it, right? We need that creativity back, and I don't know if that can happen in 1 generation, because now we're in 4th industrial revolution, and people are going to have holy shit moments and say, oh my God, what's going to happen? And should I go reskill or should I pretend? I think we have to think differently about that. That's why I think education needs to be disrupted. People need to go back and reskill. I learn every day. I spend 2 hours. Like all the stuff that I'm talking about, I didn't learn at school. right? All of this was on my plane ride from Hong Kong back. And I'm like reading up all of this. I have an app called Pocket where every time I see an article on Twitter, I go to Pocket and it downloads it automatically for me so that I can read it later. I spend at least 2 hours every day reading, right? I think that's what we need. We need more reading material around empathy, which is, and liberal arts, creative thought, and how we can add that creative thought. I think so many industries are ready to be disrupted using, or being Uberized, right? They haven't Uberized yet. It's because our creative thought hasn't been there. There's a few other questions. Yeah.
Thanks very much for such an amazing presentation. I think it's going to take a while to really digest all of the data and information you've passed along today. It's a simple question I have. What excites or scares you the most about the future as you see it?
What scares me the most?
What
excites me
or scares you the most about the future as you see it?
So what excites me and what scares me?
The most, yeah.
Okay. So what excites me the most is my children and the world that they're going to live in. I so wish that I was their age. Because I feel like the life I've lived for 44 years is so boring compared to the life they're going to live. So I'm very optimist. I'm a huge optimist about the future. What scares me the most is our human evolution, right? Because I think the human evolution has been so centered around protectionism in certain ways. And what scares me the most is this narrative of immigration, nationalism. We're going to come into election season here in Canada, the same narrative that started. If you look at around the world, by the way, it's because of AI and it's because of automation that it's giving birth to Brexit and Make America Great Again and what happened in Brazil and what's happening in many other countries is because people are afraid. They feel like their jobs are going to go away and we're going to close our borders. We're not going to have immigrants come in and others, right? Well, the reality is the world is made up of this room. And to me, that really scares me, that if people think that way, we're not going to be able to evolve fast enough. Because I think working together, we're able to create a lot more of these differentiations. AI is one demographic, right? We collectively are so many other demographics, and we learn from each other. I am who I am because I was born in a country, Pakistan, and I know that I had to flee war and the other challenges. I learned from that. I knew that when I came here and how Canadians were and how amazing Canadians were. Then I've lived in London and Singapore and others, and I learned a lot from people in Hangzhou in China and what they had in capabilities. So I come here and actually talk about China as a great country, not that China is taking people's rights away or they're doing. It's not. We should stop. So from my perspective, I think that really, I can talk to you for hours about that challenge. But any other questions?
Well, I do want to leave time for you to give a final point. I know we have a lot. And I believe you put your Twitter handle. Yep, there it is. So I think your inbox might.
Yeah, I'm happy to answer any questions on Twitter. Thank you for your time.
Well, we do want to give an opportunity, if you do, because there's been such a wealth of knowledge that you've given us. If you have a final word or takeaway that we can leave the audience with.
Yeah, I would say optimism. Optimism. This presentation was not to say this is glass half empty. It's all glass half full. Think about living in this moment. So living in this thought and change at the speed of thought. Thank you.
Thank you. That was incredible. Thank you.